Hi everyone, good morning and welcome to this new session of the TRANS-SAHARA Expert Talk series. I'm Anna Lorenzini and I will be your moderator for today. It's a very pleasure to have you all with us to introduce our speaker, Professor Daphne Gondhalekar, who will guide us through today's discussion. Before to start, I would like to briefly introduce our speaker, Professor Daphne Gondhalekar. She is a professor at the Chair of Urban Water System Engineering, School of Engineering and Designing, Technical University of Munich. Her research focuses on integrated urban planning, the water energy food ecosystem, WEFE Nexus, and multi-stakeholder participatory co-creation processes in Africa and Asia. Dr. Gondhalekar holds a Ph.D. in ecosystem studies from the University of Tokyo and a master and bachelor degree in architecture and urban planning. Prior to joining the TUM, she worked as a postdoctoral associate at the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT in the USA and at the Center for Development Research at the University of Bonn. Today, Dr. Gondhalekar will present the TRANS-SAHARA concept through the lens of the WEFE Nexus approach, exploring how it can serve as a framework for equitable and regenerative urban and regional planning. The title of her talk is The Water Energy Food Ecosystem Nexus Approach as an Integrated Urban and Regional Planning Framework to Support the Equitable Transition to Regenerative Resource Circular Metro Regions. So, Dr. Gondhalekar, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the kind introduction and also for reading the title of my talk. So I'm grateful that I don't have to read it out as well. Thank you very much. So today I'm going to introduce the TRANS-SAHARA concept as the second talk in the Expert Talk series that will pave the way for the future Expert Talks in the TRANS-SAHARA project. So to recap, what is the Nexus approach and why is it important? So the water energy food ecosystems WEFE Nexus approach was coined by the Stockholm Environment Institute in 2011 by Professor Holger Hoff. And it basically states that sectors are interlinked. So we need a lot of energy to supply water, we need a lot of water and energy to supply food and so on. Therefore, planning those crucial sectors in conjunction can address resource inefficiencies. And it's basically a systems approach that tries to break down complexity by tackling a few key entry points or a manageable set of variables. Now, we all know that our world is facing urgent, complex challenges. We are hearing about everything in the news all the time. Climate change is at the forefront, in which cities are really the key emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. We are facing pollution and environmental and also biodiversity loss. And we also we understand that these challenges are interlinked. They're not standalone challenges. So we also can understand that we need an integrated approach in order to address them. Therefore, the Nexus approach is a real opportunity to address these complex challenges and also to achieve the UN SDGs in a systematic way, because the UN SDGs are also designed to be implemented in an integrated way. We also know that conventional silo solutions often fail. So we need an interdisciplinary approach and also a transdisciplinary approach to engage with various stakeholders. So the Nexus approach is a real opportunity to prioritize our actions in terms of climate change mitigation and adaptation, and to speed up climate action and enhance resilience. So briefly touching on the state of the art of the Nexus approach gained momentum very fast in the academic world since 2011, and by now there are 6 distinct clusters in the academic communities that deal with different aspects of the Nexus. So there's a food, energy, water cluster, an energy food cluster, a food cluster, an energy biofuels cluster, ecology cluster, and the smallest and youngest cluster down here, the pink one, is the urban water energy food cluster. So although cities are crucial to fighting climate change, they are under-researched under the Nexus topic. A lot of Nexus research happens at the macro scale, so very big data, big scale studies using models that produce results that are very difficult to translate into solutions. And as we can see with these clusters, also a lot of research is being done under the Nexus label, but may only address 1 or 2 of the sectors. So there's a real research gap to produce solution-oriented evidence for the real-world application of the Nexus approach. In the real world, also, the application of the Nexus approach is lacking. So there are very few cities who have taken an integrated Nexus approach explicitly, although there are an increasing number of cities that are planning sectors in conjunction. So basically, we hypothesize that planning sectors in conjunction, also using waste streams as resources, can help us to decrease emissions. In order to do that, we need to engage different stakeholders. We need to work across different spatial scales, and we also need to involve governance at different levels of the administration. And with that, we have the hope or the aim that Nexus-based approaches will be able to facilitate a more equitable solutions to sustainable development. So we need 4 dimensions to operationalize the Nexus. As I just already indicated, we need to think about integrating different strategic sectors, that's water, energy, food, and other relevant sectors such as waste. We need to think about which technologies can work. We need to think about how to integrate different actors and stakeholders in order to facilitate these integrated solutions. We need to think across spatial scales of how things that we implement at the local level will impact the ecosystem when they are scaled up, and also how to integrate different levels of governance. So putting this in the context of Trans-Sahara, the WEFE Nexus approach is a real opportunity, and we are aiming to deploy that inside of the Trans-Sahara project. So the Trans-Sahara project looks at how to enhance water security in Africa as a main overarching goal. The key challenge that we are looking at is that there are a huge amount of climate change-induced water-related challenges in the greater African region context that include droughts and flooding events and also violent weather. But this is met in the same region with a lack of data to effectively plan resources with. This diagram at the bottom shows the density of groundwater monitoring stations, and we can see in Europe or in Northern America and other parts of the world, there is a lot of data being generated, but not for this region. So the opportunity here is to look at agroforestry systems as a key element to drive ecosystem regeneration in this region, and decades of work have already been done on this. But we're hoping that deploying the WEFE Nexus approach will help to innovate this sector and make it more sustainable. So this is a brief overview of our beautiful consortium. We have 14 partners in 5 different European countries and 8 African countries, and also associated partners, the UNCCD, UNU EHS, and 3 Japanese universities as well. And the countries that Trans-Sahara is working on in Africa is in Algeria, Chad, Djibouti, Ghana, Kenya, Mali, Senegal, and Tunisia. So if we look at the state of the art of agroforestry projects in Africa, we see that there are a lot of organizations engaged in ecosystem restoration, particularly in the Sahel zone. These pictures show a project by the UN World Food Programme in northern Senegal, which is regreening the landscape by building these infrastructures that can harvest rainwater. So this is harvesting water that is already in place, but there's also the idea of tapping the groundwater as a resource that is not being used systematically in the region in order to irrigate agroforestry systems for better crop production. And in the case of this particular project, but it's a model for projects in the region at the moment, we can say that the groundwater recharge is not being planned systematically as an integral part of these projects. In the case of this particular project, as an example, recharge is even stated as being 10 to 15%, which is less than the abstraction of the groundwater. So in Trans-Sahara, we aim to impact these 4 target areas specifically. The first one is to generate more data so that planning can be made more effective in the region. The second is to design models of agroforestry that are innovative, taking a WEFE Nexus approach that are scalable to the larger context. In order to scale this, we also need to build up capacities, and also we need to think about the incentives for local populations and communities in order to engage with this innovative approach. This is the diagram that we always use to explain how the WEFE Nexus approach translates into our context here. So again, this is the state of the art of how water is managed in the region at the moment. A local community may be implementing a bore well or sometimes a well in order to be able to tap the groundwater level. This requires a lot of pumping energy, again, therefore requiring energy in the form of PV solar, which is also a big under-leveraged potential. But there is no systematic recharge of the groundwater. If it rains, the water runs off. There's also little systematic rainwater harvesting. Therefore, the groundwater levels may be dropping deeper and deeper, making them more difficult to access. So this is not this linear way of conceptualizing infrastructure, does not help to alleviate water related risks or to augment water security in a systematic way for the long term. So if we start thinking of this community as an example of a closed system, we can start trying to conceptualize water as something that is available in the form of flooding. If we can store it, it becomes a resource for the dry season. So if we can manage to find a way to infiltrate it to the groundwater levels, in theory, we can start thinking about bringing up the groundwater level, which could save us energy for pumping. So this is an action that can be taken for energy security as well. This energy that is available for other productive uses can be also utilized for something else then. If we think about how to store as much water as possible in the ecosystem, we think about restoring the top soil, for example, through soil health restoration. This can make the soil more likely to store more water and also increase its fertility, which addresses food security and also turns that ecosystem into a better carbon sink. So this is how water, energy, and food security become linked with ecosystem regeneration, and that's how we plan to deploy it in the living labs in Trans-Sahara. Now, if we look at this, of course, it's going to need a lot of resources, and the question is, where are they going to come from? So if we think about linking different scales and about how to reclaim waste as a resource, we also can conceptualize of cities as being part of the broader ecosystem, and at the moment they are creating a huge amount of waste that is at a large cost to economies and also to the environment. But this waste at the moment is not being capitalized on at all. It's just causing externalities and problems. But actually, this waste is a very valuable resource. It has inherently containing resources like water. Wastewater is 99% water. It contains inherent energy in the form of organic waste. It contains nutrients, and all of these very valuable resources can be recovered if we have the correct technical infrastructure in place to facilitate that. So we are planning to utilize the connection between urban and rural areas to demonstrate how this resource recovery can be used to regenerate ecosystems at the broader regional scale as part of we're calling it the socio-economical technical revolution, reconceptualizing waste as a resource. So Trans-Sahara is going to instate 7 different living labs in the countries Chad, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Ghana, Senegal, and Tunisia, and also in Niger. We are using a co-creation strategy in order to implement the living labs. So we're including, we're involving the local communities from the day one in designing the potential solutions with us together. So the stakeholder process is very important, including all the stakeholders that can have any interest in implementing this Nexus approach and finding the relevant ways of doing this. So we're currently in this co-design phase of the project. In the next phase, we will go into the co-creation, which will actually be implementing the infrastructure that is needed to facilitate the WEFE Nexus approach in the living labs. After that comes a co-operationalization phase, where the capacity building will take place to enable the local community to run and operate these systems by themselves. All of this is implemented also in parallel to a monitoring system so that we can draw lessons. So in effect, we're trying to facilitate something like a balance between natural resource demand and supply between urban and regional areas for a bigger regional scale. And we're calling this the urban-rural symbiosis. Here we can see some SDGs that are being addressed, but these are just examples of the bigger network of SDGs that we aim to address through the project. So again, the question is if we need a lot of capacities and finance to scale this up beyond the living labs, where can this come from? So the first idea was to look at value creation through agroforestry systems. And these are the existing markets that we can think of for agroforestry products. So this is some pictures of a supermarket, an organic supermarket in Munich, where we can see that, for example, I can buy a baobab paste for 11 euros. So this is definitely value creation direction that we can take, but we can also assume that probably these markets are not big enough or valuable enough to be able to scale up this form of ecosystem regeneration at a suitably large scale to have a real impact in terms of sustainable development. This is pictures of the local market in Tunisia. Again, there is definitely a potential for value creation here, but it may be relatively small compared to the finances that we need. And at the same time, markets that can be used to monetize the carbon farming that the EU is looking for in our project may also not be ready to scale. So we talk about the carbon markets, tax credits, offsets, and so on. These may not even be facilitating climate change mitigation systematically, at least in the EU at all. And there are studies that show that. But if we wait for things like the EU Nature Restoration Regulation or the roadmap towards nature credits to come into effect, we may still be waiting after the end of the project. So what else is there? And if we look at new markets, that could be an opportunity to leverage on other climate finance mechanism types. So the IPCC has started calling for climate reparations as a way of transferring wealth that was taken out of Africa in this case during the colonial era, and which is now recognized as having a direct contribution to exploitative behavior that has also fueled climate change. So if we think about how many tons of greenhouse gas emissions can each individual afford to have, how can we pay for it if we have more, and how can this translate directly into funding the upscaling of outcomes of a project like TRANS-SAHARA? So the aim in TRANS-SAHARA, and I'm going to speed up because I think Anna is looking at me, is to link mitigation and adaptation very concretely. And this is what the EU Horizon program that TRANS-SAHARA is funded under is explicitly calling for. We also acknowledge that forests are indeed the only carbon capture technology that works at scale at this point in time. But we also realize that with decades of work having gone on in agroforestry already, we can see that we can never plant trees or regenerate ecosystems fast enough for them to be an effective carbon sink for all of the greenhouse gas emissions that are occurring in the world. So parallel to these adaptation and resilience activities, we also need to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions at their sources in order to be able to implement TRANS-SAHARA effectively. So we need to address greenhouse gas emissions in cities in the EU, the US, Canada, China, India, countries that have the biggest emissions. And we need to demonstrate at our own place how this cut of greenhouse gas emissions can actually work. So I'm saying that without a massive global, urgent, rapid climate change mitigation, the outcomes of TRANS-SAHARA are almost meaningless. It will be a drop on the hot stone there. That's why this aspect of mitigation has to be integral to the TRANS-SAHARA project. And we know this kind of rapid climate change mitigation is in theory possible. Here are two examples from the US, which faced the oil crises in 1973 and 1977. We'll share the slides later, so I'm not going to read this to you. But in a very short amount of time, under the guidance of President Nixon and also President Carter, the US was able to achieve a huge cut in oil consumption just simply by requesting citizens to park their cars a little bit more, a highway speed limit, turning down thermostats, and other similar actions. So it's absolutely possible. And the question is, how can this be communicated? And where is this massive global urgent rapid mitigation campaign today? So here are the United Nations COP30 key goals, and I copied this from the internet. They are summarized as these 10 points. So accelerating a just energy transition and slashing methane emissions now come closest to what we need for this rapid mitigation campaign. But a rapid mitigation campaign explicitly asking for the decrease in emissions from regular citizens like myself is difficult to find in the COP30 key goals. If we look at the 10 top climate action campaigns, I've also taken this from the internet. There are very famous ones like Fridays for Future, Earth Hour, which is the World Wildlife Fund, Doomsday Clock. We are still in Champions of the Earth, C40 cities, but these are all very specific campaigns that target particular groups of people. And it's difficult also to find one that speaks to me and about how I can do rapid mitigation through my own actions. A point that I would love to discuss with you in a couple of minutes. Now Anna is pointing at me. So the Club of Rome has just launched the Fifth Element Human Revolution campaign. And this is, in summary, where I would like to also kick off the Trans-Sahara Expert Talk series on the topic of where can we really make an impact with this project Trans-Sahara? And where exactly is the opportunity to engage between climate change adaptation and mitigation by also looking at our own front yards and what we can do to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions in order to, stop climate change. So thank you very much for your attention. And with that, I would like to open the roundtable discussion with these key questions that we've prepared. And if I hand the floor back to Anna to guide us through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Gondhalekar, and for your inspiring presentation and very clear. We would like, as already mentioned by you, move to a roundtable discussion. The idea would be to gather ideas and reflections from both, of course, our speaker but also the audience. Take into consideration your personal experience and your backgrounds. So our goal is to explore how climate finance and integrated planning frameworks like the WEFE Nexus, the one that has been presented right now, can help raise awareness among EU citizens about the global nature of climate change, especially its impact on vulnerable regions such as those in Africa, and how integrated approaches can support more equitable and regenerative futures. For instance, Dr. Gondhalekar, before she mentioned some initiatives at EU level, but also international levels. And so we try to draft some general questions that, of course, we are going to invite all of you to share your thoughts, but also reflect and share your experiences. So I would like to start with the first one. So in your view, what are the most promising pathways to mobilize climate finance for integrated WEFE Nexus solutions, especially in regions where infrastructure and governance systems are still developing, such as some countries or areas in the African continent, but not only in the African continent, because if we also look in Europe, we still have areas, or in any case in our cities, we still face a lot of issues, especially when it comes to implement like renewable strategies, or in any case technologies. So of course this question is open to Professor Gondhalekar, but also to all of you in the audience, and I would be very interested to know if you have had any experiences, or if you know about specific actions regarding this. Thank you. Yes, so I will give you the floor. So, okay. Please, Mohammed.
Hello.
Yes,
did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for today's presentation. It's very clear and very inspiring, as you said. And also talking about Sahara, because I'm trying to introduce myself. I'm Mohammed Kefi, Associate Professor in Water Research Center in Tunisia. I'm working mainly on water and the apply of water in agriculture. And based on, as a researcher, we are looking for fund for research grant. So for WEFE, it's quite a new concept, because as you said, so mainly we are focusing on water, energy, food, but with ecosystem is quite new. So not many research is doing that. But you have a Prima project. They provide fund and for research project activities on WEFE Nexus. So, and is mainly targeting Mediterranean countries and from south and north, and they provide. The fact it's quite, I'd say, important for research, and also they support non-academic sector. So they should combine between academic sector and non-academic sector to get solution on WEFE Nexus. So for mobilized finance, maybe you are now at this step, based on my experience, I think we have grant for research. And also we have when we discuss about high level like COP and COP of biodiversity or COP of climate change, many of they are talking about climate and how to finance climate for for developing countries. So we have some fund, but it's quite limited based on my experience, I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. You finally totally agree with you, I have to say, because also yesterday with Professor Gondhalekar, we were highlighting the importance to not just discuss this topic at, I would say, higher level, but especially take into consideration also the local level, what are the real needs, and also the importance to get aware of the fact that nowadays climate change is not just related to a specific sector, but there is a sort of everything is intertwined. So not just the research, but also the companies, the government, everything is very, very intertwined. So yes, we should push more on this. And this is the reason why we're also here today, because we would like to take advantage of our project and the visibility that is getting to try to push on this. I don't know if Daphne, you have comments on what Mr. Kafi said.
Thank you very much for this input, which is much appreciated, and we are aware of the PRIMA research opportunity, also applied for in the past. I think it's a very interesting one because it's explicitly targeting the WEFE Nexus approach operationalization. But unfortunately, it's limited to the Mediterranean countries. So if we're talking about the greater African region, we can't leverage that research opportunity. And we're also trying to look for ways that are not just research orientated, because working through universities also has certain limitations, as everyone who's at a university knows, definitely. So we keep looking also for different options. Thank you.
Okay, someone else would like to jump in, even just sharing some comments on the presentation. Okay, so I would pass to the second question that we can say maybe is somehow the most is more related to the policy coherence and ethical responsibility, and especially cross-border collaboration. So I would like to ask to, of course, our speaker, but also to our audience, how can climate finance mechanism in the EU be better aligned with the realities of vulnerable regions like those in Africa to ensure that mitigation and adaptation efforts are equitable and inclusive? This, I think, is a very hot topic, especially nowadays. We have seen a lot of initiatives, and also from EU point of view, of course, like our project per se is the results, I would say, of this willing to have a cross-border collaboration, but yet there are few limitations. So I don't know if some of you would like to share your experience. I don't know, Professor Gondhalekar, if you have any comments on this. Maybe people are a bit shy today. It's normal.
Thank you, Anna. Well, I think it's also not an easy question. And
No.
I mean, there are some things that we already talked about that are coming up, which are definitely interesting for Trans-Sahara. So one thing that we have talked about is how to leverage carbon credits, for example. We know that there are a lot of carbon offset projects also in the African context that, for example, plant bamboo forest and then use that for a carbon project that can be monetized in the sense. But we think that this kind of project is not really suited to Trans-Sahara because these agroforestry projects that we're trying to develop will have to be as diverse as possible in terms of the ecosystem or in terms of the species, and also in terms of the local economy, diversifying the economy as much as possible in order to make them as resilient as possible to climate, social, and also political shocks of various types. So the carbon credit type of project that, for example, facilitates planting a big bamboo area may not be a good model. Also, the things like biodiversity or green bonds that are coming up, that could be something interesting for us, but we are just beginning to talk about that in the projects.
Yes, as you said, I would say that is a complicated questions. But in any case, I forgot to say before that these three questions will be also shared through our social media because we don't want to stop our conversation and our roundtable just today, but we are open to receive also in a second moment your thoughts, and you can always contact us, and also if you want to have a separate conversation on this, just so you know. Okay, I don't know if someone from the audience would like to. Okay, I see that there is a comment. 1 second. Okay. Oh yes, I can. Thomas, I can do that for you. 1 second only. That I found it. Here we go. Please. Now you should be able to.
Yes,
Okay.
now I can say something. Thank you very much. This is very kind of you. Well, thank you for the great presentation, Daphne. And I just want to give a comment more general. I think it needs to be thought about how can all of this happen actually also with less funding, that we have to go away from always this funding idea, and we have to go more to the regular business ideas, as we live in a capitalistic system. So there is some clear rules about it, and as you probably all do, you all have to pay to get rid of your waste wherever you live, I assume. And this is something I think it could be introduced also in these countries we are talking about by their municipalities, especially I'm talking about the big cities, where there is no waste segregation, nothing, and like we have heard, some fraction of the waste, or basically all the waste, I can say, is only waste until you look at it with different eyes, and then you see that in this waste can be a lot of resources in various ways. And if you take a look at the biomass, this is about 50% of the waste. So it's always good to look at the biomass because that reduces the waste by 50% and is a quite interesting fraction, as Daphne said. 95% of that waste is water that you have there, and then you can generate lots of things. You have the nutrients, you have fertilizer, you have energy, and actually, Daphne, there is a Japanese patent where they can generate drinking water from the digestate of biogas plants. So I thought this is a real smart thing, and I have basically contacted the researchers, but I have not heard back. It's also for our small plants not so interesting, but for bigger biogas plants, of course, I think it's literally like a must-have, this option to create the drinking water. So basically, in a nutshell, what I want to say, you have to think about more, self-funding things through normal things like, for example, paying for waste, or you have to bring your waste. If you don't want to pay for your waste, then you have to segregate your waste and bring your waste to the appropriate recycling places where it can be recycled. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and great to see you. We continue the conversation soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And actually, it can be also linked to the third question, your comment. So thank you so much. I see that there is also Professor Biller that raised his hand. So please. You can hear us? Maybe you need to unmute yourself because I give you the possibility to talk, but I don't know.
Think now it's going to work. Yes? Okay. So apologies for not showing my face, but it's 6:40 here in the morning and I'm getting ready to teach. So a few ideas based on the great presentation and the questions. I really liked this sort of the drawing of the city with the groundwater and the way that it could move towards a more sustainable model. And it seems to me that the first question, it's very telling, right? So infrastructure and government city systems are still developing, which provides a unique opportunity here, which they can sort of develop better, which is what we would be looking at. In that sense, and in other questions as well, ultimately where these things come from, money for these things come from is by and large public, and related to this, it would be debt, right? So infrastructure is highly financed, particularly large infrastructures in bigger cities and so on are largely financed by debt. This poses a bit of a problem because the world debt is probably the highest today, around 235% of the world GDP. So which way can this sort of framework be more attractive to bring in investments, right? Either through debt or through direct interventions. Well, I think that one way it would be to have clear indicators of what you are delivering. And this, in the framework that is presented, has a lot of potential, I think, in terms of determining, at least, I'm not an engineer, but at least on the natural resource engineering side, things that are measurable and they're fairly easy to measure. I mean, as you mentioned, groundwater, for example, we know it's measurable. So the impact in the society of this increased groundwater, it's much harder to measure. So one idea would be to really look closely to indicators, not only those that are easy to measure, as I mentioned, but also extended to those that are more difficult to make it more attractive to particularly private sector to bring money in, right? So that would be one idea, particularly for the first and the third question. The other thing that it was mentioned a lot was agroforestry and agroforestry systems. Now, there are agroforestry systems that have been working, as we all know, for many, many, many years. And some of them actually have been able to develop to capture a little bit more of this market, right? So, for example, shade coffee comes to mind, shade cocoa comes to mind. And one of the characteristics of those agroforestry systems is that to make it profitable or sustainable financially, it basically, they fall in a very unique, let's say, price range, right? So if say, cocoa, if the price is very low of the international market of cocoa, the price is very low, it pays to cut the natural forest and to put something else there, like cattle. If the price is very high, it pays to cut the natural forest and put something else there, like a plantation cocoa. So how will you be able to sort of fine-tune that issue in order to make it, quote unquote, the right price to have a sustainable activity? So this, I think, it's a challenge, particularly given the area that we're talking about. On the advantage of the area, in my view, I mean, it's a very broad area, of course, and there are very large cities. I don't think that in those large cities, well, some of the infrastructure is already there, so it's going to be a bit harder to make a big difference. But it is primarily, in most countries, a rural area, right? So it may be worth to start small in those rural areas, in small cities, in small towns, and then try to have pilots that actually you can expand across the region. Two other comments, if I may. One of the reasons why probably nobody's monitoring groundwater in the Sahara, it's also because there's hardly anybody in the Sahara, right? So population is very low. And ultimately, if there was a lot of groundwater, it would probably be very expensive to bring it where the population is. So that's one comment. And the second comment that I would like to raise, and Daphne, I'm sure that you have heard me saying this before, but on the context of the 1973 oil crisis, I mean, the big disincentive to use excess amounts of hydrocarbon was price. So price basically went up 4 times, and in real terms, today oil prices should be around $130 a barrel if we want to compare with the price of 1973. Unless we have a very clear price incentive, it's going to be very difficult to change that equation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dan, for all these great insights and your inputs. And we look forward very much to discussing this more with you in the framework of the Trans-Sahara Advisory Board.
Yes, thank you so much. Also, because I think your comments, as before, they are quite linked to our third questions, and especially the idea of the blended finance as well, or community-based funds. But I think is something that we should discuss further. Maybe we can also organize an additional roundtable later on when we gather even more feedback and ideas, because I think it's very, very important, as also Professor Biles was saying, not just take into consideration the resources or the results of research, but also the condition, the environmental condition in which these farmers live in, also to find a solution and tackle climate change. I see that we are running a bit out of time, but in any case, I think we still have a few minutes to address officially the third question related to the innovative financing models. So I would like to ask again to the audience if someone would like to jump in regarding this before to wrap everything up. Okay, I don't know, Professor Gondhalekar, if you would like to comment on the third question. So otherwise, we can close for today, I think.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think that this third question is the one that we are looking to have a lot more discussion about. We don't know the answer to this question. That's the whole point of this roundtable. I think maybe just to close off and to touch on one thing that Professor Biller said, getting the price right for the agroforestry products such as cocoa, that could be a clue for us. So what we were thinking was that the price is one thing of the product, but that what the farmer is paid should not just only rely on the price of the product, but also depend on how that farmer is contributing to ecosystem regeneration. And when we talk about indicators, the indicators that we would see for that are the soil health. So we're thinking about how to measure the impact of the interventions that Trans-Sahara is planning to have in these living labs. And the living labs are going to be designed as a couple of hectare large demonstration sites, is the impact on the carbon storage capacity of the soil. So the idea is to showcase how the more diverse number of crops, let's say, can influence the storage capacity of water in the soil and also its capacity to store carbon. And somehow that added value that the farmers are bringing by tending to the land so that the ecosystem can be restored in that way, that should become part of their income. So that's how we're trying to push this. So that's linked to what kind of financing model could come into that. So we're trying to look also at green and biodiversity bonds, for example, but so far we haven't found a single financing model where we can say this is a very good fit. Let's just use that. So that is the context of the third question, and I look forward to having a lot more discussions with everyone in the room and also others outside of the room for today in the future.
I see Quado, so please, the floor is yours. You should be, sorry, now you should be able to talk.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself earlier. So I'm Kojo, a research assistant at the Technical University of Munich. And my contribution is a bit related to both the question on number 2 and then number 3. I think that in as much as there's been efforts to bring about various financing models, and there could be improvements in the way these financing models are also introduced to the developing countries. One thing that is an underlying problem for a lot of countries is the lack of capacity building in the countries themselves to be able to take advantage of these mechanisms. So the EU, for example, has this green partnership with Morocco. They've tried to start bilateral partnerships directly with countries. Like also, there's also this just energy transition bilateral partnership. So cooperating bilaterally with the countries, with beginning with capacity building. This might even help to be able to have tailored financing mechanisms through co-creation. So with these developing countries themselves, if the EU and other organizations like the UN are co-creating with these, are doing capacity building in the capacity building process, there might be this co-creation or to see what are the exact targeted financing models that can be developed, and the countries are then in a much better position to take advantage already of the existing ones. But without this capacity building, a lot of countries just in terms of readiness are very, very lowly prepared to take advantage of these mechanisms. And a lot of these mechanisms are also then not really tailored or targeted towards the actual needs of these countries.
Thank you so much, Guado. And yes, I think this is another important point. I also recently been involved in another project that actually is focused on cocoa in Africa, and the capacity building, the communication, and the kind of challenges that especially some farmers from remote areas have in accessing not just the knowledge, but this kind of infrastructure, we could say, solutions. So I think that this is also another very important point. Okay, so I don't know if Dr. Gondhalekar, if you would like to comment on Guado comment.
Thank you very much for the great point, Guado, and absolutely. This yes, capacity building has to be integral to what we are doing. But also there the question is how to do this in a sustainable way, in an equitable way, and also in the words of Professor Biller, in a way that, or also told the story, that doesn't cost huge amounts of money, that is manageable, that is creating business opportunities, that is really incentivizing engagement in a sustainable way. We will continue to work on that.
I see that Mr. Kefi raised again his hand, so the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself. Now I give you the...
Thank you again. Just I will be brief. So the question are there innovative in financing models? So my question may be, if there are any database about experience about, for example, natural-based investment or community-based fund. So I think we need to focus on creation of database for sharing experience, as my colleague said about, for example, capacity building or model, efficient model existing on WEFE application. So it'd be interesting to have this kind of database, and we share different experience, and especially, I mean, existing experience succeed or not succeed, because both are good also to understand the situation. So it'd be interesting to have this kind of database, and then based on these models, we can apply it in other countries, for example, in Africa or in Europe, and then you can get information how to apply it. It be in research or not research activities, or both. Thank you.
You mean also not just from a data point of view, but also like a sort of platform where there is like direct interactions with other researchers?
Yes, like that, yes.
I think that is a very interesting idea, and maybe I don't know, I put it now on the table, but as I was mentioning in the beginning of this webinar with Professor Gondhalekar yesterday, we had quite a huge brainstorming, and we were trying to understand how to get the best out of this project, not just in a matter of to achieve the goal of TRANS-SAHARA, but also how to think about the beyond the project. And we're looking also for collaboration also from other researchers and projects. So Mr. Kefi, I think is very interesting what you're saying. So we invite you, but also the rest of the consortium to get in contact with us and bring this conversation further, because I think that the idea of the platform, for instance, is a great idea. And as you said, also not just sharing successful stories, but also the ones that are not really successful, to understand and learn even better. Yeah, I don't know if Professor Gondhalekar would like to say something on this.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I think this also this comment was very right on the dot. And yes, I think we should definitely look into what kind of databases already exist. What are they doing? How clear is the information, and how can this be brought into Trans-Sahara in order to leverage on what is already there, or develop maybe a part of the website also as a database that is easy to use for learning, for upscaling and peer-to-peer learning. Thank you very much for that one.
Okay, so if there are no further questions or comments, I think that I will use for the time being, we can wrap it up now, because I think that these questions we should delve into them. And so I'm just reporting some comments from Mr. Dori, Professor Biller, and Berlanda Michele. Thanks, Professor Gondhalekar, for your insightful presentation and discussion. And please, I will repeat myself, we are here today is just the beginning. As you might know, if you're following us through our social media, we just started this activity that we call the Expert Talk series. We would like also to expand it to more roundtable discussions, because we think that we have a common goal, that is the one to try to find solutions to tackle climate change from different aspects. And we think that this could be a starting point. I would say the draft of the platform that Mr. Kefi mentioned before to start to boost the conversation, knowledge sharing, best practices, and see what we can achieve all together. So thank you so much for being here, and I would like to thank Professor Gondhalekar. I will leave you the floor if you want to greet as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna, for the wonderful preparation, moderation of the event, and thank you for all of the comments and questions and the dialogue. I know it's always a little bit strange to engage, especially these online meetings. We're all tired of them, but it's fantastic to have your inputs, and we look forward to having more of dialogue in the Trans-Sahara project with you in the future as well. So we're here, as Anna said, and we love to hear from you and collect all of the ideas and have your engagement whenever you have time to share with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and see you for the next episode, the 15th of October, with Professor Teketai. Thank you, and I hope to get in contact with you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.